What's going on, guys? John out here with you. As promised, it's the Silent Hill 2 Remake review. How's everybody doing, ladies and gentlemen? Let's post-date this for Thursday, January 9, 2025. That sounds good to me by the time everything gets all linked out. So, let me just start as dark as I possibly can. Silent Hill 2 Remake reminds me of my own mortality every single day that I play it. And the reason why I say that is because as I sit down 37 years old and I look at the initial release by Konami in September 25 of 2001, I've already seen parts 1 and parts 2 of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, and there's already rumors that Resident Evil 1 is going to be remade for a third time. So in between Director's Cut and all that, I don't count it. So Resident Evil GameCube, and then Resident Evil modern consoles now. So kind of gives you an idea of when you've played all those games in your childhood, you're growing up as an early teenager, and then now into it as an adult, and then seeing these games remade again. It's just, it really, really hits at your mind and messes with you, and that's what Silent Hill 2 does best, doesn't it? Hell, that's a good segue. Came up with that on my own. But anyway, you play as James Sutherland, and you try to go ahead and figure out just what the hell happened to your wife, Mary. And you go back into that town of Silent Hill. If you never played Silent Hill before, you don't consider it a Resident Evil knockoff. I think that's a really poor taste of saying it for Bloober Team that has already done a great job with this remake. Silent Hill, the Japanese team, Team Silent, everything else before it, I think would be really happy with the way that this turned out, because psychological horror is where it's at when you're playing Silent Hill. And that's how it is. So this game was a beloved PS2 gem, maybe a year or so after the console release. And for me, playing the initial trifecta 1, 2, and 3, no, I never played Silent Hill 4 The Room. Heard some good things about it, heard some not so good things about it, but you can watch Bach Basoup play all those type of games. He's got a good channel, he can give you a lot more details than I can. But as far as this, I think this game is pretty damn good, and I think Bloober Team did an excellent job, all things considered. You really can't go into a game like this and please everybody, because again, when you saw the first iterations of this being announced at the Tokyo Game Show and a lot of other stuff going on, people were saying, damn, this game needs a lot more cooking in the oven as far as the physical counterparts, gunplay, rifle, shotgun, and the mix of that. You're going to be using your trusty lead pipes and wooden planks and everything else and going up against your nightmarish fiends. And you still do a lot of that, and I'm happy to say, even with the dodge function and the circle button, I know this game's on PC, it's going to be coming out on Xbox after the window release. I think there is a timed exclusivity here for PS5, but it's not going to last that long. That, story-wise, everything else still fits up the same way. They didn't make a ton of changes there, didn't need to. It was already really good. Graphics-wise, I think you can really go ahead and say now, with the power of the PS5 and modern consoles that we've already had there now, I know PC you're going to get the 120 frames per second or whatever the hell you want. I think you get a steady 60 here. I think maybe even some 30 on this side. Either maybe steady 30. I thought it might be 60, but I think it's 30. But it doesn't really hinder anything else that way. What you can really say that's been done well in these consoles, especially by Bloober Team and everything else too, is the lighting in the shadows. Once you get the flashlight, it's going to be your best friend, and that's really the only way that you can go ahead and traverse around without being, pissing your pants or worrying about anything else that's around you. The shadows and the effects and everything else are great. If you have the PC version, you can use other mods to kind of take all that away and change the game experience if you really want to. I don't think you should. That's not the way the game has been intended to be played, but you could, because there is a lot of shadows, there's a lot of foreboding stuff, and if you want to be able to see a little bit clearer, you don't need to adjust your TV. It's already been well adjusted for the games if you've played before and you've done it right. But you're going to deal with the most amount of things popping up in the shadows and giving you a good scare. And speaking of cheap scares, I'm going to say this game is #1 all time. Silent Hill 2 Remake. I can't tell you how many times Those mannequin legs that you just saw me fight there with the lead pipe scared the living hell out of me as far as a jump scare, more so than anything else. If you're a fan of cheap scares, those will get you every single damn time, and it does not change. But again, the graphics look fantastic. The one thing that this game will get a 10 out of 10 on from me, it's not going to get that as a final score, but a 10 out of 10 in the sound design. Absolutely brilliant. This is the best sounding game ever. You can turn up the volume as much as you want if you got some subwoofers and all that stuff like I do. Again, depending on when you play it in the dark or if you have people that you're living with, can't necessarily crank everything up that much, but if you play it with headphones and the DualSense controller, I recommend turning up your controller speaker a little bit because it takes the radio sounds, emits it through your controller, kind of can tell when enemies are coming. You're not going to be able to see them, but you get the sound design and the foreboding feeling that you get that churn in your stomach and you know something's about to happen, and I really like that. With the executed sound design, you can kind of pick out some of the enemies in the corner, kind of be able to use your wits about you, and I think that that's the most brilliant part of this game. Story and cutscenes, as we mentioned, alongside with James trying to find his wife Mary and just unravel what the hell the mystery is behind all of that, I think is pretty well done. I also will say my favorite parts of this game, and it's probably not meant to be said that way, but it's really traveling with Maria that way through most of the game. I really enjoyed that part of it, and I really appreciated, as much as I was a freaking maniac with the pipe breaking windows, I don't think I ever did that as much as I did in this game in comparison to the original Silent Hill 2, but I like that Maria picks out on that. Just, you scared the hell out of me, James, or after you do it so many times, I know I'm really getting used to you doing that. It's pretty damn interesting, and I like the cut scenes and everything else involved with Maria and Eddie and the little girl that escapes my name and everything else across it right now. And I enjoyed those, and I enjoyed the interaction, as nasty as it can be, as much of adult themes that we talk about. Again, a little bit different in Doki Doki Panic in terms of me calling that the scariest game of all time. I know some people laugh and say, where does Silent Hill 2 rank? Honestly, and this might not just be because I'm 37 or an adult, Doki Doki Panic scared the crap out of me, and I told you about that in the review. Honestly, with Silent Hill 2 Remake, I feel pretty good from where I'm at. No recurring nightmares or anything else like that. I really just enjoyed my time playing it. Jump scares out of the oblivion, for sure. But everything else kind of felt good. And I will say this, you could mention that Bloober Team probably could have spent some more time in the oven. There is a little bit as far as graphical glitches, little oddities when you're checking up the map. If you brushed up against the wall, you'll see a lot of clipping and things that maybe I wish would be cleaned up because it's prevalent and happens a lot. I'm not going to let that take away from the total score of this game in totality all that much. But there probably should have been a little more seasoning in that regard. I do think that this game could have, if they really wanted to, with the release of the PS5 Pro, maybe about a month and a half ago and this and that, they could have waited until that came out and then got all the other upgrades and everything else and got it running right. Because if you had the PS5 Pro when you played this game first, textures were warped, they were missing all over the place. I know games are all about patching and things nowadays, but I do think as far as some of the graphical glitches, it can be a little bit jarring. It doesn't take you completely out of the experience, but that could use a little more seasoning. So again, I like the story. I like the gameplay. Sound design was perfect. I like the mix of lighting and all that too. I think Bloober Team did a good job. I really have a hard time giving this game a 7.5. That's kind of where I'm at right now, 7.5, 8. That doesn't mean I think it was a bad game at all. There's a lot of things I like, and I can say that from what I saw, Silent Hill 2 was the fastest selling version of the game that they've had in between that holy trifecta of 1, 2, and 3. And my hope is Bloober Team gets a chance to do it again for Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3. Now, do I dock this game extra points because Silent Hill 2 is not my favorite in the series? Absolutely not. I'm not going to be jaded in that regard of it. I know this game is a PS2 classic and a lot of people love it. I think the game's good. I enjoy it. Is it my favorite in the series? No. I really want to see Silent Hill 1 get remade because it's been stuck on the PlayStation 1. I'd love to see that, even though Silent Hill 3 is my favorite game of the series, and is a direct sequel from one from Heather Mason. I really want to see everything else get remade from 1, but 3 is my favorite. I hope that Bloober Team gets a chance to do this again because they did a great job, and I really hope that more people play this game. You kind of debunk some of your fears there alongside playing psychological horror games. Maybe don't get as much of the psychological horror in this one as you did in the initial trifecta for Team Silent, but it's still damn good. As far as everything else and some closing thoughts that I want to mention in the last few minutes, again, story, it makes perfect sense as far as what all the characters are going through. I don't want to spoil everything for you, but I think if you get the picture when you walk into this that each person experiences Silent Hill in a different way, and it's a way for you to deal with your past traumas, your vulnerabilities in life, and confront things head on. And I'll show you in the ending that I got. You won't see the ending, but in the ending that I got, there's 8 different ones. I think the famous UFO one also starts. I don't know if it's 3 or 2, but that might be in this one as well. There's about 8 different ones. There's New Game Plus. There's multiple playthroughs. I was pretty shocked that when I ended up finishing the game, it took me a little over 20 hours. I think it was like 24 hours. Again, I explored a lot. I pretty much checked everything, and I guess the way that I had it set up with the Maria ending was one of the most convoluted ways to get that ending. You can say that can be considered the bad one. You could probably say that I agree with that, all things considered, if you understand the way the story is going. But it really isn't all that complicated. It's pretty interesting in the way that it's all dissected and how you deal with your fears and how you get to the next portions in your life and how it's interpreted between each characters. I thought that that was pretty freaking interesting, and I really enjoyed that part of it. So that was just something I want to throw out there. New Game Plus, again, once you get through all that stuff, you can get a bunch of different variances and how the graphics look. You can kind of change the gameplay style a little bit. I know that there's a lot more mods that you can do on PC, but the other thing with the accessibility settings, kind of like it was, that's when I praised Last of Us 2 on that regard, even though I thought it was one of the worst games of all time. But accessibility settings are king here in Silent Hill 2, just to make sure that you get the experience that you want, that anybody can play that. And I think that that's very important, especially for games like this. And my hope is, again, as we talked about, Resident Evil 1 being remade essentially for a third time for the preeminent between the original in 96 and then the GameCube remake and then now the upcoming PS5 and PC and all that. That Silent Hill 2, I imagine that it's done well. I would like to see this team get another chance between 3 and 1 and remake these games continually for modern consoles and get people to get to play these instant classics, because Silent Hill 2 is going to go down as one of those. Even if I give it a 7.5 or an 8, that doesn't mean it's a bad game. I really enjoyed my time with it. Just take your time with the story experiences and enjoy what's there and appreciate the sound design, the darkness, and everything else across the board. So again, you've seen the mix of some of the puzzles and everything else in the game too. If you play on hard difficulty, especially in between Silent Hill 3 on the PS2 side and you got into the library, I don't even know how you figure that out unless you follow everything across Shakespeare and Lit and all that too. So I think the puzzle difficulty can get quite excruciating, but that is what guides are for. If you put it on harder difficulties, I wouldn't have been able to figure out some of those things if I didn't look them up. Again, I'm not a box full of rocks inside my head, but I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed either. But enjoy what it is. I will say this too, on the normal side, I ended up with a lot of health drinks and syringes. You could probably turn the combat difficulty up a little bit as well, and you would still feel good, probably on a hard mode. That's my guess. But what did you think of this one? I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure what reviews coming next because I got a few left over for Christmas, but thank you for indulging me here.